Former Charleston County Register of Deeds employee Karen Hollings beat out current Charleston County Register of Deeds Michael Miller to become the Democratic nominee for the Charleston County Register of Deeds office. I speak exclusively, Karen, for this edition of Quintins CloseUps. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintins CloseUps on Facebook. Karen Hollings, welcome to Quintins CloseUps.
Well, thank you so much for having me. We have tried to connect here for a few times here and successful this morning. I'm glad to be a part of your show today.
Thank you. Thank God and Jesus as well in heaven. Obviously, you are the Democratic nominee for the Charleston County Register of Deeds, and I'm actually looking right at the office where you might be sitting in November. You might be sitting in November.
Yeah.
You said this after your victory because you won 65% of the vote over your opponent's 35% of the vote, I believe. You said this, quote, "I would like to thank the voters in the Democratic primary for trusting me to fix the Register of Deeds office." Let me ask you, Karen, who is Karen Hollings 3 days later?
Still floating on a cloud. And, you know, I was so pleased and delighted with the overwhelming support that I had during the process of being a candidate running for the primary, and overwhelmed by the response and the turnout that I received on election day. And I made a promise to all of those with whom I spoke that once I decided to file for re-election, which was the day after St. Patrick's Day, and it was the day I learned that the incumbent had filed for re-election, I basically adopted that 5-second rule. I made a decision, jumped in, and I never looked back to overanalyze and overthink and go, oh my God, what have you done kind of moment. I knew right is right and wrong is wrong, and I felt like I had to right a wrong. So during that process, you know, when you are an active candidate, you have to gain the trust and secure that with pitching who you are to people that you know and to a lot of people you don't know. And it apparently worked, and I'm delighted it worked because I met a tremendous amount of people that I've never met before and came up to me and they voiced their concerns with the issues at the Register of Deeds office. And I told them with my knowledge and experience, and with the grace of God, I'm going to get in there and try to fix all this.
What are the wrongs that you want to make right with this particular office?
There are a few, and you know, as you may or may not know, I left that office a year ago in April after 16 years of combined experience with the Register of Deeds out of complete frustration. And the issues that I saw while I was there, I think and believe continue since I left. And the first thing would be staffing issues, management issues. And as we all have various personalities, you don't want someone up at the front counter dealing with the public if they'd rather be in a corner indexing documents and vice versa. And so, you know, the staffing issues are going to be reviewed. And just to put everyone's mind at rest, I'm not going in there and cleaning up and, you know, but I will be looking at who's doing what and what they're doing well and what they're best at doing.
And this is just an obvious question for you, Ms. Karen. Would you actually keep on those present employees?
I don't plan on getting rid of anybody unless, you know, they are not happy with being there. That's going to be up to them to determine. But you know, obviously in the year since I've left, there has been a turnaround of a tremendous amount in that office. And, you know, to give you a comparison, when I was there were 26 employees, roughly speaking, maybe 25, 27, but roughly 26 employees. And over the course of my time there under the management of the current incumbent, nearly 20 people left. And I saw basically a mass exodus of seasoned, qualified, experience, and hundreds of years of service walk out that door. And I was concerned, why? And even when I gave my notice and other people gave notice, the obvious question of why was never asked either by the management in the office or, the higher ups at Charleston County. And anyway, so to circle around to your question, I will review very closely who is there, and we will figure it out.
Now, Ms. Karen, out of those 7 people who were actually left besides the 20 people who actually just had to leave because of certain situations with management, how many of those people, say for those 7 or more people, how many of them had to actually take on more responsibilities?
There were a couple, especially with, excuse me, I've been talking about myself for 75 days, and I've got to have a little sip of water here.
Sure.
Anyway, give me 1 second.
Sure, no worries.
When I think about additional responsibilities, I think it's not so much additional responsibility, but I think most of them had to, agree to doing overtime and coming in and doing what they do best. And so I hope that answers your question. I know it's a very simple answer, but there are a couple of positions within the office where people can, jump from one position to another job. But for the most part, everybody had a specific job to do, and they jumped in to help where they could.
And before you left, what additional responsibilities did you personally take on to make sure this office was floating right?
Well, my job was strictly that of a legal document examiner. And I had the most experience at that time of any recorder in the Register of Deeds office. So my job was very specific to reviewing, processing, recording, advising, and assisting attorneys, paralegals, the general public with complex questions about recording to simple questions about how do you get a copy of your deed and that sort of thing.
Wow. And I want to get back to that in just a second, Ms. Karen, but let me ask you, before you left the office last year in April of 2021, did you actually have an opportunity to sit down with, obviously, the leader of the Register of Deeds office and say, hey, these are some of the concerns that I have right now?
Yes, and yes, and yes. There were several meetings that I was a part of individually and part of a group.
Right.
And to make clear record of, me along with recording staff approached the incumbent 3 years ago last month, and then another follow-up meeting 3 years ago this August, when we saw the beginnings of what we thought was going to be a backlog. And now this is pre-COVID.
Right.
No one knew the whole world was going to be shutting down in March. Right. We had numerous months to tackle this, and and as with anybody who owns a business, runs, manages, supervises,
right,
the one thing you don't want to have happen is an employee or a group of people who work for you approach you with a problem and not have a solution to fix the problem. And we offered several solutions. We offered overtime, and we were told no, there was no money in the budget for that. And then we shifted gears and asked, well, why don't we consider doing comp time? Like if we came in early and stayed late 2 or 3 days a week, or dedicated 4 hours on a Saturday for comp time, that could parlay into getting like an afternoon off or a day off at some other point, which would not have cost Charleston County one dime, not one dime if we did the comp time. And again, we were told no. So that was one instance, and then there were several other meetings, and one in particular when I was asked to have a one-on-one with the incumbent, and he was concerned with this mass exodus of seasoned help that decided to quit their jobs, and very few people actually decided to retire. Let me rephrase that. Several people had targeted at some point retirement. They were getting to that golden age of service and age and what have you. But a lot of people kind of put the pedal to the metal and accelerated their plan to leave because of the condition of the office. So with that being said, I was called in, and there was a voice of concern about people leaving, and I was asked, well, what should I do? And I told the incumbent, I said, you need to, and I did one of these chop, we need to focus on employee retention. And I was really kind of surprised when I was asked, well, how do you do that? And I said, it's very simple. I said, you start appreciating and complimenting and pairing that with a raise, and let employees know that they have a chance to elevate their job title if they stay. With anything, a compliment goes a long way. Signs of appreciation and respect go a long way. That was not happening. And I think a lot of people just got completely frustrated that while we're showing up, we're doing the work, the inner leadership team was not. We were told to show up for work, and if we didn't, there could be consequences. And this was during the major part of the shutdown, when I was one of 6 or 7 people there, driving into a ghost town, parking in an empty garage, which you never see downtown,
no.
And walking into a thriving county office building that used to thrive with people buzzing around, totally empty, and not a single one of the leadership team was part of that, which was very, very upsetting to me.
But Karen, let me ask you this. Did he understand that was part of his job, to be there to help you all?
That's a loaded question. One would say yes. I am of the mindset, and I've always adopted this attitude, do not ask of others something you would not be willing to do yourself. And so when the recording staff was there, not 5 days a week, we're working 6 days a week, trying to tackle this problem with the backlog. And, someone's maintaining his business somewhere. Other people are just not showing up as far as his inner leadership team. And it was a real hit to the morale of the office, to be honest with you, that, here we are, we're doing the work. And even if, someone could have shown up with biscuits or donuts and coffee and helped us a little bit, would have been greatly appreciated. But that just didn't happen. And, it really kind of played into the overall feeling, the way people were digesting things. When you kind of think about that whole period of time, we were all in a depressed state of mind on some level. some of us, and thank goodness, this was not my situation, but parents trying to juggle teaching kids at home while trying to maintain a job, doing remote access to helping with the backlog, and not being able to see your family, not being able to travel. Your whole life came to a screeching stop. And I just think this was another hit and blow to the recording staff and the people who were not just showing up downtown like I was, but people who were, operating remotely. There were a few that were doing things from their home. But, it's, again, to circle around, don't, if you're going to ask of your employees to do something, you need to be willing to jump in and at least be present to show a level of support and respect for the job that we were doing.
I know this might be a silly question too, Ms. Karen, but did you all at some point ask the leader of the office to basically chime in when the backlog really became aggressive for you all?
There were numerous meetings about that. There were so many meetings I can't really count and document per meeting what was said, but there were several conversations about how to do it. And unfortunately, the suggestions or really the opinions of me and maybe a couple other people, and one situation in particular was limit the amount of recording time that people can drop off or access or come in to record. And, one of them being, as we were kind of on the tail end of it, where the office had been open to the public, safety measures were made with plexiglass, and, closing off two of the recording windows and having one recorder open. I said no. I can remember one situation in particular where it was suggested to us up front, I was on the front line, that I was going to stay open all day and two other windows were going to be closed. Oh. And I kind of turned my head. I said, I'm not doing that. And I basically said, and the look was, well, why aren't you doing that? And I said, have you ever been to a bank on a Friday afternoon? And I said, there are 20 people buzzing around in the bank, but there's only one teller open. Right. I said that just doesn't work. This was an approach that had been adopted and not suggested by me, that I kind of felt like all boots on the ground. I think the office should have been open for business, at least with the optics of trying to accommodate and take care of everyone who walked in. And in addition to having 3, live-bodied recorders on the front, there were like 3 or 4 behind me. So, there could have been whatever measures could have been taken to get caught up without any interruption. They could have done it in the back. But our job in the front was to approach and offer our help to attorneys, everyone who needed to have their documents recorded.
Ms. Karen, what is the relationship now between the Registered Deeds Office and those real estate attorneys? Has that been tainted by this, controversy over there?
Yes.
Huh.
I think it boils down to a couple of key things, Quintin. I think it's loss of trust, loss of confidence, and the real estate business, not just with attorneys, they have to answer to their customers, their clients, and there are also title insurance companies who have had a tremendous amount of heartburn over the decisions that are being made. And every decision that's being made as it relates to real estate that, in my opinion, the backlog has contributed to, and the lack of proper management has kind of filtered into facilitating, is that when you have delayed recordings, delayed untimely recordings, or unrecorded documents, it's going to hit you in your wallet. And when I worked for Judge Lewis Condon many years ago, fabulous judge, we did, specifically, for the most part, real estate related matters, foreclosures, quiet title actions, partitions.
Sure.
And he said something to me that was very correct and very wise. He said, the most sensitive nerve is the one that leads to one's wallet. So that's why everything we do in this office is respected. We have people who, a $500 check on a division of ownership of a property could mean everything to them,
Sure.
or the lack thereof.
Yes.
And so anyway, but yes, it was, I think there was loss of confidence, a loss of trust, and the fact that the problem just continued and was not being dealt with, in my opinion, in a really thoughtful manner. And go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just thinking this too. You talked about those untimely recordings. How many of those were there in the span of 4 years since he's been there?
I couldn't begin to tell you.
Oh.
I could not begin to tell you, but I'll give you a very good example of what happened after I left the office. I took about a good 4 or 5 weeks off to take care of visiting my grandchildren, taking a breather. And I actually thought, what can I do to help with the process of getting this backlog taken care of on a civilian end? And I approached one of the busier law firms who does a lot of Johns Island transactions, and they have 2 offices on Johns Island and in Mount Pleasant. And I approached the managing partner and his number one operations manager, with whom I knew, and I said, I think I have an idea. And I said, how about if I jump in and get every single one of your FedEx documents pulled from the Register of Deeds office and stand down there hours and hours and hours at a time to get you caught up. Because when you buy a piece of property and you can't get a copy of your deed because it hasn't been recorded, that's a problem. And, the attorney can explain it, that there's a backlog, but I was the one who was going to go in and make everybody look good. I was going to take care of the attorney, take care of the staff, and more importantly, take care of the person who has purchased a property, mortgaged a property. Yes. And so I went into the office in May, I believe, and presented a letter of authorization to retrieve the FedEx. And if you've ever seen a UPS deep, UPS deep bulk mail bin, I had 3 of those where it was so tightly packed, you couldn't put a steak knife between 2 envelopes. And this is FedEx. This isn't drop-off stuff. And this is money that people have paid, or this firm had paid, for someone to open up, take a look at immediately, because that's the whole business of FedEx, immediate. And it took me 29 days and 86 hours standing down there, opening up every day, FedEx. And when I started in May, they were pulling stuff that was sent in March. Late February and March. And I stood down there and I got things done. And I did, word got out that I was doing this for this law firm, and then about 3 or 4 other law firms and a few other here in Charleston, one in New York, and one in Savannah would FedEx to my house on a Saturday for me to go down there at 8:30 on a Monday to get their stuff recorded, because the gap, they could not have a gap in their stuff.
Right.
So yes, there was a tremendous amount of work, and the 3 bins were just for this one law firm.
Wow.
And the fact that I had heard that all of the visible mail, there were like bins lined up on every wall in the office itself,
Wow.
and actually leading into the incumbent's office with a date on it. I heard, and I since have learned that all of this stuff was kind of put back in a storage room down the hall, and it was under lock and key. No one was allowed to go in there except for 3 people. So, yeah.
Who were those 3 people, Miss Karen?
The incumbent, the deputy, and I think one other person was allowed in there.
And you talk about that deputy. Did he understand your concerns and try to take that to Mr. ROD?
Well, it was actually a female.
Okay.
And she came to this office from Williamsburg County as a chief deputy, and to be honest with you, I've since learned that in Williamsburg County, it's such a small county. I think their register of deeds is combined with their clerk of court. So she did not. She knew the significance of the backlog, but I think her knowledge of what needed to be done, and more importantly, her lack of jumping in to educate herself and learn the recording and the cashiering system, which is a very sophisticated component of what we do, that just wasn't happening quick enough. So everyone was aware of it, and I was quite frankly a little surprised that, especially when you have a job title as chief deputy, that is like the go-to person you go to. There's a hierarchy of who you approach for guidance, help, and tell me what to do about this. And it just really wasn't there. It wasn't there.
What should the current ROD be educating himself about right now?
That I don't know, because, with him, not prevailing in the primary, I don't know what his plans are, but I think his main focus, if I were in his situation, I would not want to have anything left undone. I think the way the office was presented to him when he took over, and it transitioned from the previous to him, to just give you an example, when I was there preparing for his transitioning and being sworn in, there was not a paper clip, a rubber band, a return envelope, a cover letter, or more importantly, one document left to be recorded. It was handed basically on a silver platter, and the office was squeaky clean.
Sure.
And I think that should be his objective from now until his last day in there, to leave on a high note, tackle whatever issues are plaguing the office right now, and there are a couple, and leave the office in the state in which you received it, fully functioning and everything caught up.
And those current issues, Ms. Karen, what exactly are those that you're hearing right now?
I'll tell you exactly what it is. And my biggest issue right now is the fact that there has been quite a bit of chatter as it relates to being the backlog is caught up. And I'm sure there is a component of that is true, but and I, beg to differ on how someone classifies a caught up or the backlog being caught up. And for instance, like when a document is recorded, you obviously put it on record. It goes through the cycle of other people, the auditor, the assessor, and the office itself. They are 68 days behind with indexing and imaging. And they are, and this is not as important, but it's vitally important, the processing of a totally recorded document, where the last stage of the processing is mailing it out or giving it to a law firm. They are 99 days behind. That's over 3 months. And the problem with not having a document that's indexed or a document that is imaged, it creates havoc to an attorney, a paralegal, a title abstractor, an appraiser, and more importantly, the auditor in the assessor's office, because you cannot look and verify a legal description. You cannot verify the price of what someone sold or paid for a piece of property, which affects the assessor's office. It affects, appraisers who can't document for the purposes of comp purposes when doing a real estate appraisal, because you don't know what the value is.
Yes.
And so I don't think the backlog is caught up. I think when you're 68 days behind with indexing and imaging, that's a problem.
And Ms. Karen, there's so much I want to ask you. They're giving me 7 minutes on Zoom with this 40-minute limit. But let me ask you, how many of those imaging documents, were, an issue prior to the backlog issue?
There was, the only way I can answer that is that I know under the previous administration, we would tell people it would take us a week to 10 days before their document was mailed out. And it was indexed immediately, as far as like within the next day or two, went to the imaging department. They did whatever they had to do. And there was a numerous step verification process on the indexing end. And it's my understanding that a couple of those steps to not just verify on the front end, but a re-verification on every level, like the misspelling of a name, a question about a legal description, that kind of thing. So that took us a week to 10 days when it was the good old days at the Register of Deeds or at the RMC office.
Oh, yeah.
And now when I hear 68 days, that to me is problematic.
And what time did they want to really limit recording time at the office?
Well, that varied, but there was a time last winter.
Oh, yeah.
I want to say it started in December. They limited the access to bring in a document from 8:30 to 11:30. And I thought that was the most idiotic and poor decision, period. And I'll tell you why. When the office closes at 11:30 and everyone takes their lunch at the same time, and let's just swing back to 26 people, that is 26 hours every day that nothing's being done. And that was bothersome to me. And more importantly, to initiate that in the busiest month of the entire year, I thought was unconscionable. And there are so many people who in the practice of law, who handle estates, estate planning, where it's critical that by December 31st, that they transfer property maybe from themselves to a trust, from themselves to an LLC, or, transfer it from, one owner to possibly a spouse or a grandchild. You can't limit the recording time on the last day of the year. You just can't do it. And I thought that was an exceptionally poor decision. And it did not increase the amount of documents that were recorded significantly. It might have been a little bit of a bump, but I just thought that was a very poor decision. And that practice continued for several months. And it was like a floodgate opening up at 8:30 with lines out the door. And at 11:30, the show is over. Your opportunity to record had passed. And so there were several people, especially commercial realtors, who approached me that they had to have a delayed closing because they could not get their documents recorded after a 3:00 closing because the recording office was closed for business. And that was very problematic.
Wow. Out of those 26 employees from 2020 to now, how many of those actually work from home, and how many of them actually work over here?
Well, good question. I don't know because I'm not down there anymore. But it's my understanding that there may be an employee, a former employee or two. I cannot give a number that may be helping out remotely. But a lot of people wanted to continue helping remotely, and for whatever reason, it was not adopted or accepted by the current administration. So I don't know, but the office ran very well for a number of years with just 26 employees, period. And the fact that again, it's a source of angst to me when you have to reach out and get employees from a neighboring county, Berkeley and Dorchester County, to come down, and they're being paid.
Yes. And
how much they're being paid, God only knows, to basically prep documents.
Yes.
And that to me is problematic because, again, between overtime to the current employees and paying neighboring counties to come in to help you out of the problem that you created, how much is that costing the Charleston County taxpayer? I would love to know that number. And why isn't the leadership team there prepping documents? Why haven't they been told or shown or coached or have taken the time to learn how they can help facilitate the expedition of getting documents prepared to record? Because guess what? If the leadership team showed up to do that, there wouldn't be any extra money that probably needed to go out. I would have required personally, if the buck stops with the department head, and if it were my call, I would show up. My deputy would show up. My supervisors would show up, and I would not ask the county taxpayers to pay one dime of our taxpayer money for us to show up to fix a problem that was created with lack of management or poor staffing.
Wow. And one last question, Nick, just give me less than a minute, but quickly, yes or no, the backlog, when did that begin before COVID?
Like I said, the beginning signs were in May 3 years ago, and it continued after that. And as I mentioned earlier, it was I equate it and compare it to the beginning waves of a tsunami.